Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you from the Extreme Studios just west of Orlando, Florida. Here, I've got with me from also Central Florida, the young 20 something Professor Pixel. And Pixel, we're going to be talking about the second movie in Hammer Horror's Karnstein trilogy. The vampire one has adult sexual themes to it, same sex relationships if you identify as female, if I'm using the current vernacular appropriately. Um, this is an interesting film. I'll start off by saying that when we recovered the last one, it kind of blew up. A lot of people seem to like it or tune into it. I think these are
Mhm.
definitely a different take on in vampires, which I appreciate it. And this film is definitely different than the first one. In many ways, I think it's a bit more elegant and actually interesting, but on the flip side, not really a lot happens despite the amount of beautiful women and set pieces. I've got one
Yep.
big issue with this film, and it's the main guy who I actually think is a good actor. I just think the way it was written. But the only thing that made sense to me when I tried to do a little bit of background research on this film was that they really tried to have to tone down some of the lesbian stuff. So they tried to amp up some of the other stuff. And you know what? That was a fail on their part. They should have kept continue with the theme, and we'll see what happens later when we do the third film. What's your initial take? And by the way, as a young 20 something guy learning Hammer horror films, was this the first watch?
Yeah, this one I haven't seen Lust for a Vampire before. I was very, very pleasantly surprised by the Vampire Lovers, and so hearing that there's a whole trilogy based on that's great. That's great. I couldn't wait to check out the next one. My initial takes. So I think that this is a very, very decent film. I think some of it is kind of lost on me, but reading more into it, I understand what they were going for. I just don't think it conveys fully all of the story notes that they were looking for. And you're absolutely right. I mean, imagine if the film focused mainly on near Carla, going ahead and just working her way throughout the girls' school. That would have been a far darker way to go. But no, she's bisexual now. She's a bi-pyre.
A bi pirate, not a butt pirate, for those of you that don't have discerning ears, but a bi pirate. Yeah, and I think the thing that was interesting about this being a Hammer film is that it's called the Hammer touches to it as far as the set pieces and the coloring and the blood and beautiful women galore, which we're going to be talking about. But it was also directed by the same guy, Jimmy Sangster, who did, and all three of them really, I believe, and also the screenplays by the same guy, Tudor Gates, which means nothing to us as Americans or anybody at all. But the thing is this guy's done a lot of good stuff, and actually Jimmy Sangster, when I talk about like the small studio things, I always think of a modern day equivalent would be like a John Carpenter that did a lot of his own writing, directing, music scoring, kind of a what would you call it? A jack of all trades, master of none sort of. He did it because he had to, and he didn't have the budget for people to do it. So Hammer kind of did the same thing as well. And so when you have a studio that's known for putting out these kind of things over and over again, usually the level of quality isn't, I think, that big of a drop. It just depends on what you like about it, how much you're willing to take. Because in this one, like I say, the main problem I have, and we'll go ahead and dive into it, is the main actor who hasn't done too much, but I'm going to talk about Miss Playfair. Exactly, Ed. I've got a lot, and I'm going to surprise Professor Pixel about it because there's a connection here locally with her. Um, so yeah, so the whole idea of Miracala, Carmela, whatever the name you want to call the first vampire was, is supposedly at the end of the last film they died, allegedly. But we find out here there's a little bit more to the Karnstein castle that some villagers live around in the town, and um, it's okay. Here's my take with this main dude. He reminds me of two guys, one British, one Welsh. And yes, I'm delineating because at first, the way he kind of looked, I thought he looked a little bit almost like a young Tom Jones without the pork chops, on the sideburns, right? Um, he almost has Timothy Dalton's eyes, who I believe is also Welsh.
Oh man, I
Obviously, I
can
don't know
see
if
that.
yeah, I don't think the guy can sing, but who cares? This is not a movie where he has to. But the way he physically sounds and almost the way he talks and his mannerisms. He reminded me of a semi sober Richard Burton. So I actually like this guy a lot. I think he had a very sharp mind to it. And when we first meet him, he's this guy. We find out he's a writer. He's in a small town. He's having some beer. He's flirting with the local ladies. We see a beautiful blonde one running off past him and all that. And he's having some what I feel to be harmless conversation with the innkeeper there about what's going on locally. And he asks the guy to, hey, tell me what's going on. And that's obviously a very convenient way for us watching the film to kind of get filled in on the story with some more details added. And I think we're off to a good start. Now, I'll talk more about why I don't like him later, even though I think the actor's fine to it. But the whole setup for this too, I mean, the least creepiest things I gotta say in the first two films here is the whole parent vampires walking around. They look absolutely ridiculous.
They look horrid in this one.
They look like your parents trying to dress up for Valentine's Day.
In the last one, when we are introduced to the concept of the Countess and this looming figure who's always laughing in the distance, but never actually a part of the action himself, they had a look to them that was like, they look cool. They look interesting. I want to know more about them. But then they take this weird turn in this one. Like the Count Karnstein, he looks ridiculous. Like he's trying to be a mustache Dracula. It comes off as
it's bad,
as like a cheap cosplay.
Yeah, exactly. But the opening gambit is spot on. I love, we get a decapitation, we get lots of blood, we got some great effects. This opening gets you hooked, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, glad you liked it too.
No, I agree. I agree that it's just the guy looks ridiculous and it's hard to take seriously. But no, with the opening gambit going through the reveal that, hey, there's a school right by Karnstein Castle, but it's been long abandoned, so the school's fine. But I don't know if this is a hot take, as the kids say, but I think Carmilla, whatever you want to call her, I think she's a lot more attractive in this film than the last one.
It's a different look. It's a bit more of a younger, feminine look, where the other one's more of a mature, milfy look, I would say. And
yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that.
They always try to make her young in the other.
Yeah. Obviously the women in here are very gorgeous, beautiful, natural, no tattoos, very little jewelry, very classically built, let's just say. And it's just a staple of horror movies that you're going to see women that from the chest up are very fulfilled, I guess, in terms of their acting credentials. But yeah, the whole opening gambit where they abduct a chick from the inn, working there, walking across the field in the middle of the day, so they can slice their throat, get the blood and all that. This would be something we would see, I think, in Dracula's Risen from the Grave. I think it's the third one and all that, which is really cool and creeped me out as a kid. This one's not bad, even though you're looking at it going, yeah, I know it's plastic and all that, but somehow the way it looks in here, you're like, this is probably about as good as it's going to look, and it just feels old doing it. But the parents performing the ceremony, bringing their vampire daughter, McCullough, back to life is just kind of ridiculous. But they're wearing cool outfits, and the set piece is just incredible. But I love the pulsating thing with the blood and her coming up. I'm glad they didn't shy away from that. There's a way of them doing it where it still kind of looks disgusting, even though it's not. It's probably real cheap effects, where even by today's standards, you could do something that you go, man, it looks great, but it doesn't feel creepy. I don't know, but there's just something about it. But we meet Richard Burton at the end. Go ahead.
The thing that I love about Hammer horror films, and I think I was writing this earlier on Twitter, the thing that I love about them is how accessible they feel. They're very special, obviously. I think most of them are well made, really well, but they feel accessible. It feels like something that somebody now could do. They just choose not to.
Exactly.
Compared to like most horror films right now, I mean, come on. This should be easy access. You can find an abandoned castle and rent out the space for an hour for a party. Why not do that? Make some kind of short film that's close to this quality, because it's got such an allure to it. It's got such charm that you can't match with with the nun, or what's the one with the hand that A24 just released?
Talk to
You
me.
can't match. Yeah, you can't match that. You
Talk to Me,
can't
by the
match
way, was
it.
before there was the Black Eyed Peas. Fergie was in a group with three chicks in it, and that was a big hit song, I think, in 97, 98, maybe, called Talk to Me. It was a nice little catchy tune if you were going to dance clubs at the time, but you weren't even born, sir. But you may have been born to the beat of that song. I'll just simply say, or at least conceived, depending on how you define that. But you're right about the accessibility. And I think a part of it, too, with the Hammer ones is the set pieces. As soon as you see them, I think, and I don't know all these directors type terms or producer terms or whatever, but you pretty much get to see what the entire set piece is as they go into it. So you know something's going to happen for the most part in each part of it. And when we come back to set piece later in the film, let's say, you know that if you haven't used that one part, you'll probably use the other. So it's almost like it's already there, and it's not all this cutting around. We were trying to figure out what's going on. You immediately do feel like you're there. And of course, they use a lot of their filming locations close by to some great effect, especially in here. The cut on, I think it was Tubi that I saw this on. Phenomenal colors, intense, just great. I love the fact that these films don't have like a line running through it, that little stray hair in the upper corner, which means nothing to you, but for people that watch old films know exactly what I'm talking about. I would just call him Richard Burton, just because. But yeah, he is a bit more attractive. I would agree with Princess and Chad about that too. And I thought he's got a bit of a, I don't want to say masculine vibe to him, but he seemed a bit more adultish. Like okay, I'll play nice. I'll listen to these guys. He didn't seem like he was completely above them and completely snooty. I thought, because what he
No,
does is he's a guy that writes on all this kind of stuff. He's a writer. I'm like, oh geez, a writer, but he hears what they're saying, and he's just having a beer, and he's really got nothing to do. So he's like, well, screw it. I'll go check out the castle. And I'm like, all right, we're on. So he goes up there and he's checking it out, and the music in here is okay. It's pretty standard. It's pretty forgettable, but there's a few parts that come up that are a little bit more, I thought, different than some other Hammer stuff. And I'm no expert on Hammer music, but I thought some of it could be maybe old Gregorian chant or something. So I thought some of the parts stood out here. And when he's looking around at the castle in the exact same spot where we saw the decapitation 5-10 minutes earlier, some women come around and block his way, and they're all wearing these robes. And these shadowy figures come in, and he's looking around. I'm like, oh, it's on now. What's going to happen? Is he going to pull out a cross? Is it going to be whatever? And it turns out that some dopey dude there with glasses is there, and he tells them all to stop. And it's a swerve. It's a bunch of really beautiful young women at what's called a finishing school, kind of like they used to have back in the day. The idea is you could go there, learn how to be a proper lady and a skill set or whatever you want to call it. The British invented a little bit of that kind of stuff that migrated its way over here to the States at some point. And this guy's like in heaven because he's like, man, I'm surrounded by all these hot chicks. And then the guy's walking him down, explaining to him stuff. Again, a data dump. And we find out there's a girls' school right here. And you're like, holy shit, what a convenient setup. This is great. And of course, she has to walk around with his hand in his pocket, which is a very stuffy British thing to do. And he's just thinking, oh my gosh, this is, I've hit the jackpot. What's going to happen? And what I thought was tremendous is when him and the guy that's, I guess he's the headmaster there, the main teacher, he's walking up, he's explaining everything. There's the scene, and this to me, even though we're still in Act One, this is where it kind of almost, this movie almost has a bit of a dreamy, very slow kind of feel to it, and it really starts here to me because they're walking up the steps and there's this big garden area and grassy area, and all these ladies are doing this sort of dance yoga thingy or whatever, and they explain what it is. And the guy's looking at it, and there's this one blonde that looks almost Greek-like with her dress and her hair's up. Absolutely stunning, gorgeous. We will be talking a lot more about her. Of course, none of them are wearing bras because who wears bras, right? But it's like, oh my God, a bunch of beautiful women. Are they all going to be vampires? Are they all going to be victims? To your point, are they all fodder? But she's giving him a bit of the freaky deaky eye, and you see him gulp, and he's staring at her. There's some nice camera work. This is that almost feminine touch to the film that you go, okay, it's supposed to be a lesbian vampire thing. What's going to happen here? These two are obviously going to hook up, because if this is in a bar, it's like, hey, I'm going to buy you a drink. What do you having? I just thought it was kind of nice, and it just felt different because it's at a girls' school. It's not. We had a bit of violence early on, and we're about a half hour almost into it with almost not too much more going on. I thought it was a nice little setup because we do get introduced to some key players. What's going on, of course. Mercala or getting coming to the girls' school too with her mother, which obviously is a big deal. Let me pause here and let you fill in some gaps and give your take.
Yeah, no, I do want to talk a little bit about the like dreaminess that you're saying, because there is a sequence in here with this weird song about strange love. Um,
It's not
that
as bad as Just You from Twin Peaks,
it
but it's
is not
close.
as bad as that.
I'll talk about that when we get to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that you're right. The potential of this could be a slaughterhouse. Like I think there's a total of what, by the end of the film, 1 or 2 girls die. That's it. That that's
It's not
weak.
that many.
Why are you
It
so,
actually would be too
why are
easy
you
to
so
kill them
weak,
all.
Mir Carla? Why are you so weak?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, the
but
answer is love, but
she's a lot more human in this film if you think about it.
yeah.
She's got a way about her that she feels like she's not the full power that she was in the last one. Like I talked about at the end where Carmilla, Mircarla, whatever we were calling her at that time, was trying to take that one daughter that was lovely. She was great, and obviously we were captured by her. But Mircarla was just, I need you to come to the castle with me. I need you to stay with me. But here she has that way with not men per se, one man, the main guy, but not the creepy teacher who's like, oh, I know what you are. Let me serve you.
Yeah, it's you know, the school itself, there's no like other real main front behind it so much as it's just obviously a setup for where a lot of action is going to happen. I didn't realize it was going to be that way, but we cut to where Mercala is eating all the girls, and you got the head lady there, the Greek lady, as I like to call her, with the white dress, checking it on. Of course, this is your gratuitous a nudity scene, which is completely fine. It's not as bad as like in the '80s where a girl would take her shirt off and say something dumb, stupid, and it's like an in joke for the audience. This is more of a natural feel to it, where they're going about their evening business, changing for the night, getting ready for bed, and you just happen to see all this stuff. So it's done in a what I would call a tasteful manner. Not that I hated the '80s version or don't like it, but it was more blatant and obvious, and that was the joke back then in the '80s. How soon before this one's going to take her shirt off because she's got the biggest rack? Here it's just young ladies doing their thing, talking about how hot this new dude is, and what's going on. But Mercala, I agree with you. It's an interesting point. Like is she kind of weak and almost human-ish? Because she just was reborn, and it takes a while, and then she becomes more feral, more vampire-like. I don't know, but he's the dude goes back to the bar at the evening, and he's telling all these stories about that, and everyone's like, buying him drinks. He's like the man, right? Because all these hot chicks are on to him. He actually went to the castle, so his stock seems to be rising. Until, of course, there's a scream outside because yet another lady from the inn who was serving drinks. One of them has disappeared. This one now has been bit, and he sees the 2 holes on the neck, and that's it. We don't really see the act itself. But then we cut to where it's the evening, or whatever, and we get some nude swimming where one of them's meeting him out there, and of course, um, it's. Let me let you talk about this first. You're the young 20-something. We don't see stuff like this in movies too much these days. What was your take on this whole thing with the ladies swimming and what happens next?
Well, I mean, it's done in a way that doesn't feel like the the cheap 80s horror film. Oh, we're going to go skinny dipping. They don't make it as, like you said, they don't make it that goofy. Oh, well, I'm gonna. No, they're just they're just some nice girls playing in the water. I think it's done well.
Innocent, almost, really virginal, if
Innocent,
you want to call it that way.
almost.
Well, true. They're not
Except
talking
one.
about banging a frat boy or something stupid, right?
Yeah. No, because they aren't thinking that way. I mean, they're trying to have a little fun, just a little bit of danger. It's not the one girl's fault that the other girl is a vampire. How was she supposed to know? I'm
Right.
going to use this as a way to complain, though. Listen, I understand that obviously you want it to work well. You want the story to be able to bend to a proper like schoolhouse. So she needs to be out in the day. But the sun is supposed to be a weakness. She is not weak in the sun. She's just there in the sun, and it bothers me quite a
Well,
bit.
it's a little different in these films that they did establish that in the last one.
I know I didn't like it then either, but at least it was more plausible for her to stay. She was inside most of the time. I don't need them sleeping during the day. They just can't be like out. Oh, well, let me go sunbathing. You know?
Yeah, well, it's pretty much the rest of the movie, because we only wanted to just touch on this movie. We'll definitely do an in-depth review on it at some point in the future. I'll say this about it, because I wanted to spend a minute or two talking about the fly as fuck headmistress there. Not headmistress, but I guess dance teacher, PE teacher,
Oh
whatever you
yeah.
want to
Oh
call her.
yeah.
From what little I could tell looking this movie up, it was a situation where a lot of people think this movie is the worst of the three because it's so different. I had absolutely zero issues with it at all. I like the fact that it felt different than the first one. I have no problem that Murkoff is played by somebody else. Doesn't
Yeah.
bother me at all. The guy
What
meets a
bothers you then?
writer, kind of warms his way in there. But the problem with the main actor is, at some point, he basically turns into a little putz, where he finally captures Murkoff at night one night and professes his love to her and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, this isn't how you've been acting up to here, and she wasn't doing the trancy eye thing, right? And they make sweet, sweet love with the music playing, and it's campy. It absolutely it's
Yeah.
trash over the top. I was like, what the fuck? And the problem with this is that you get the dance teacher there, Miss Playfair. Get it, Playfair. Janet is her name. She's played by an actress named Susanna Lay, right? And I wanted to talk about it for a minute because, to me, honestly, I've said this before, when you have somebody that's, say, an attractive woman, if she's too attractive or presented in such a way where it takes your eyes off everybody else or distracts from the scene, that's not good. Now, don't have a problem with women being attractive or whatever, but it's kind of like when somebody shoves boobs in your face and you want to have a conversation. You're like, I can't right now because my concentration, I can't break it. And to me, Susanna in here kind of stole the show because her character was a very strong
Really?
woman. It was almost like a love triangle. And I wanted to get your take on it because I wanted to talk about a local connection we
Mhm.
have here in Central Florida with her.
So my problem was really she has that whole staircase scene, the one
Yeah.
I'm talking about, and she brings her up. I thought Carla was going to go up from like she closes the door. The shot is perfectly set. You have this woman in a trance. They're both stunning. So no, my attention was was able to be split. But I thought she was going to come up and just attack from the back. Just, go ahead and sink her teeth in. But instead,
Seduction,
they
lesbian
they
style, baby.
chicken
It was
out
great.
on it. They chicken out. They chicken out, and it bothers me. They didn't do more with answering Verity Princess. Why didn't they do more with the love triangle? Because I feel like they had so much to do, and I feel like they cut corners somewhere. I feel like bits and pieces. They have the idea of a love triangle, but they don't really put it in there because they don't know what they want until they have to get to the end. And I think that's the problem.
Yeah, I agree. I think they just forced an ending there at the end to make it work. Where if they had explored this a little bit more, because it's almost like two love triangles in a way where he's in between the two, and I thought that would have been great rather than the mystery of the guy's father coming in, them digging up the grave and finding out what was going on. And the ending, while violent, obviously sets up for a third film, which we'll talk about some point here in the future.
Okay,
I'll close with this on
wait,
her. Go ahead.
but that fire can't hurt us, and then a giant chunk of flaming wood stakes her. That was pretty great.
Yeah,
That was
and
fantastic,
bloody.
though.
Yeah.
It looked good. That's
So
what I mean.
I agree too, but it's We'll see if
Okay.
they go a completely different way in the third one, or if the third one's more like the first. I'll say this about this actress because I looked her up. I was like, have I seen her before? Do I know anything about her? She was in an Elvis movie, one of the Hawaiian ones, where she got kissed. So that kind of made your career if you're back then in the day. Elvis was a big name. You being a young 20 something, you don't know that, but I have to share that with you. I know you've heard of Elvis. Um, Even if
You
Bruce
don't think
Campbell
I know
you
that
think that
Elvis
was a
was a
thing
big
of Elvis.
name?
No, well, the reason why I'm saying it is because like, okay, did I see her from there or whatever? But she did a few things, but she died about 5, 6 years ago. She was battling cancer. She was trying to fight it naturally, but something else technically killed her. And actually, I always say that I live on, west of Warlando, Florida. I call it Warlando because of the way things are going here, and I'm on the outskirts. Suburbs rule the world. Um, and you're technically not in Orlando, but you're south of that just a little bit. You're near the theme parks, Disney, and all that. And I don't get too specific. So she actually lived the last years of her life in between us. And literally, I am not joking when I say this, just a few streets away from some people that I've known for a very long time personally. And I looked her up, and it was in Winter Garden, Florida, where she had passed away and apparently had been volunteering the last years of her life with the Historical Society there, and like going to, like, horror cons. And I know you'd go to some of those or whatever. Especially, they're real popular down here in Central Florida. And I thought, wow, everything I read about her was that she was just a really incredibly nice woman. And the reason why I bring this up, just besides the local connection, is I think you summed up the big problem with this movie about why they didn't really get into the love triangle, and they really should have. Is she conveyed what I thought was kind of the whole point to this, a different take on lesbians and vampires and seduction and all that, where you don't have to kill a lot of people, have a lot of beautiful women. It's not blatant eye candy. It was done, I thought, tastefully, whatever. The guys weren't completely stupid, although the guy has a bad, I think, writing change there when he professes his love and all that. Then basically gets all rapey and makes, Ed Brewer had said it best on Twitter. It was, hey, prove to me you're not a vampire, have sex with me, but I don't really want to. Here, let me help you make that decision. And then they play the cheesy music. That was a little cringy, but he just sounded like a butthurt little boy, and that's not how he came across. I just thought they missed a lot with her. I thought she'd be a bigger role in the movie, and she wasn't. So I think that's a big part of the downfall too. They did not really resolve or do that triangle plus one whatever well at all to me. I thought they should have done more. Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I think it's a solid film. I think it's going to. It might be when I weigh all of it out when we get to the third one, which I guess we might do next week, maybe. Maybe
More lesbian vampires is always a good thing.
Yeah, twins of evil. Yeah, there's twins of evil right there. I can see them. But I think it's a solid film. I'm glad that we have continued forth in this trilogy, and I hope it ends strong.
Good. Yeah. All right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Something we just wanted to get in here before we move on to our 7 o'clock here, where we're going to be talking about the Kill Bill inspiration film called Lady Snowblood. Extremely violent, graphic, yet another strong woman, too. So you can kind of see that we're getting a little bit of horror films and just happens to have some strong women in it. So kind of interesting take as far as when I saw it. I thought it was actually pretty remarkable in some ways, but we'll get into that on the other one. Look for that. That's already posted. We're going to be starting here in just a couple minutes. I want to thank you guys for showing up on this. We'll post a little earlier in the week if it's going to be the third one, which I still believe is actually on Tubi right now. Great print, not edited at all, so you're not missing on anything that we discussed about it. We'll do a bit of a deeper dive on that third one than we did on this one tonight. Absolutely. Hammer Films are just special. We love covering them here too. 5 out of 10. I like Hot Chicks. Yeah, I'd probably give it a 6, just because I feel a little guilty when I can be overpowered by something if it looks really good, even though it's functionally not very good, despite my male frame of mind. Just the movie's just very glossy and it's pretty to look at. I could see watching it again and turning the volume down. So we're just having it on for atmosphere's sake. It's not bad. It's better than the mag, and that's kind of the test we like to use here. So, all right, guys, see you over in the other chat here in just a little bit. This is Rob signing off for myself and of course Professor Pixel. Stay extreme, guys. Good night.
This is not a Dan Curtis production.
Yeah, and it's not a Quinn Martin one either.
It's a Hammer horror.